Good afternoon, everybody. It's time for Interviewing Wednesday. We're live on Zoom and Facebook. We've got many people watching around the country. I am currently live at the AMCP Expo in Chicago, Illinois. So things may be a little bit different than normal. I don't have my normal computer set up, so we'll see how things go today. Get to my, there you go. So for those people on Zoom, if you have any questions, please just enter your questions in the chat box. We'll get those questions answered at the end of the session. For those watching on Facebook right now, thank you for joining us. Please enter any questions you have in the comment field. Please note this event is being recorded and is currently live on Facebook. The recording will be on the Career DFW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channel for others to view in the future. By participating in this event, you give consent for your name and picture to appear. Any comments you put in the Zoom chat window will not appear in the recording. Please know you're welcome to put your personal information so you can network with everybody else who's on the call today. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeff Morris. Back in 2008, I started a website called careerdfw.org, a website to help those who are unemployed in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. In 2012, I started a second website, careerusa.org, to help those around the United States. I have written a book called What I've Learned About Your Job Search That You May Not Know. It is available on Amazon. Since 2007, I've been facilitating and leading the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group. The group's been around since the late 1990s. I took it over in 2007, and I'll tell you about our upcoming program at the end of this session. And since 2017, I've been a member of the practice interviewing team. We're not going to get into what the practice interview team does today, but if you're interested in having a practice interview, please reach out to www.dallaspitcrew.com and you'll find out more information. Well, today we're going to talk about avoiding interview crashes. This presentation was put on by Mark McDonald and Walt Glass, two interview experts out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Back when COVID started, I reached out to these two gentlemen to talk about, would you like to do a Wednesday presentation every Wednesday and talk about different things? And these two guys went and put their heads together and they came up with a 13-part workshop. And this happens to be lesson number 13 out of 13. And I'll show you all the lessons, all the different workshops they came up with at the very beginning. So we're going to, if things work out here, we're about to watch the video.
And we're just going to look at the common mistakes that people make, and hopefully you'll be able to avoid them once you're aware of them. We're going to look at them all at once, in a group. And now, at the end of this, you may be kind of overwhelmed. And so it's hard to characterize these things as mistakes. Some of them are definitely mistakes. Some of the things you want to avoid, at all cost, could be very detrimental to your chances, but others are just best practices. So if you do these things instead of doing it some other way, you're going to have a much better chance of improving your candidacy, of being selected as the final candidate. So we'll try to identify some of those as we go along. Okay, I have a couple of big sections here, and then while I'm suggesting that the statement of enthusiasm be the greeting. So right away you start to talk about why you're enthused about that particular role. Okay, then you have an opening statement. You've prepared an opening statement and you deliver that opening statement. Often the interviewer will say, tell me about yourself, or what brings us together today, or why are you interested in this position? So that's your key to make your opening statement. And so you do that. And now let me tell you what the white X's mean. The white X's mean today we're going to talk about this topic because this is a place where people make common mistakes. Okay, so we're going to focus in on those topics with a white X on them. Number 4, after you made your opening statement, is you ask your first question. And these are questions designed to get the interviewer to talk about what their most important priorities for this position are. Okay, and so you may need to have a little deference to the interviewer, because now you're going to start asking your own questions, and they may not have actually had time to ask you one yet, except for, tell me a little bit about yourself. But it's very important that you do this right up front. And you'll notice as I go down here, there's some highlighted things in yellow. Every one of those is an opportunity for a question, and you should take opportunities to ask questions during your interview. And consider this, when we have a whole session just on asking questions, and one of the things we ask the people who attend that interview, do you believe that just answering the interviewer's questions is going to put you at the top of the list? And most people say, no, that's probably not going to do it. And that's absolutely right. So just going in and answering questions and not asking any questions is not the fastest route to landing. And so it starts right at the beginning. After your opening statement, you ask a question quite a bit. Now you get a chance, maybe you get asked a negatively oriented question. I see you don't have this experience, or I see you don't have this degree, or tell me about a time where you made a mistake, or the project you were working on didn't complete on time, or completely failed, so to speak. So you're going to get a chance to do that, and we're going to give you some feedback and reminder about how to do that well. A common with us, what are they usually unhappy about? That'd be a great thing to know, because they just ask you, how do you handle an unhappy customer? So that's a best practice, right? Is to, not for every question, you can overuse these, but at the appropriate moment and something you're curious about, pop up a question based on something they ask you. Answer the question, why did you leave your last job? And of course, that's something I coach on, and we have half of a session dedicated just to answering this question. You're likely to get this question early in the interview process, maybe not the first interview, but certainly after that, people will be curious about why you left your last job, or why you left several of your last jobs. So that's just the thing people are curious about. Here's an opportunity now to ask a leading question. So you lead with, would you like to hear a time when I did something, and then, that's an achievement. You're trying to lead the interviewer to let you tell a story that you want to tell, okay? Let you tell about a success that you want to talk about. And so that's a leading question. There's another way to work in a question and talk about yourself and your achievements and how you can help your new employer. You want to throw in some humor. You want to demonstrate your personality a little bit during the interview. I guess it's really a mistake to be completely stiff and formal. And so don't be afraid to share some of your personality during the interview, and use a little humor. I mean, not everybody's good at using humor, but this is a good idea. And make a positive quip, or to share a little bit about yourself when you're answering a question. Now, if you're in a panel interview, more than two interviewers, then or more than one interviewer, I mean, you have to make sure you pay attention to all of the interviewers. And so this is something that we see people make a mistake of, focusing too much on one interviewer to the exclusion of the others. Ask a question with the specific purpose in mind of building rapport or building a connection with the interviewer. And so expressing curiosity is a really endearing quality. So specifically, this is what we suggest: is you ask a question, I'm curious to know how, or I was wondering about, and get the perspective of the interviewer. So you'll gain information, and they'll appreciate the opportunity to talk about their perspective, their thoughts on something that's interesting to you. And of course, what's going to be interesting to you is something about how you can help them in their roles based on your previous experience. And it may even be something that they haven't thought of, which would be really a home run. Compliment the interviewer. This is something that very few people do, but if they say something insightful, or you're starting to build this connection, this rapport, you've got an opportunity to compliment them. Now, don't use this on panel interviews unless you are complimenting the entire panel, but we'll talk about that too coming up. Bring your work product. This is a great thing to do. Bring some work product with you to show off at the appropriate time. And even on the video interviews, you can't hand it to them, but you can show them. You can say, at the beginning of the interview, I have the job description, I have the resume, I have my list of questions I'd like to ask. And oh, by the way, I brought some work product. This is a data sheet that I did. And if we get a chance, I'd like to share it with you or talk about how I did that. So there you go. Now you've got some work product. Work product's really, you're an expert in what you did. And if you're, it gives you a chance to be proud of something you've done in the past that's applicable to what they need. So that's a good practice as well. Answer the question, what are your salary requirements? We have a half a session just on this as well. The same one we talk about, why did you leave your last job? We also talk about how to answer this question, what are your salary requirements? So this is not going to be something that we give much feedback on today, but it is part of the list of preparing for and delivering a good interview. And then your almost last opportunity to ask a question is your end of the interview question. So you prepare these in advance. Some of them may get asked during the process of the interview if you get a chance to drop them in, but certainly you'll have some at the end. What are the next steps? And asking for some feedback at the end. How do I match it with your ideal candidate? So and we'll give you some feedback on mistakes that people make in this regard. And then finally, a big one, ask to be advanced to the next step, ask for the job, make a good closing statement. So mistakes are made in this area as well. So that's kind of the script for a successful interview, using all the parts and pieces and techniques that we teach in this 13-session series. Common interview preparation mistakes. So number one, not focusing enough on the company's missions, values, goals, and customer experience. In general, you need to spend time figuring out, what's important to the company and their missions, values, and goals. And if they have a retail presence, you can go to their store or their office or visit their website and find out what that experience is about. Okay. Also, not very many people, or not enough people, I would say, who come through the pit crew have attempted to seek out information from former employees or current employees. Okay. So you can locate former employees on LinkedIn, and you can try to network into them and just ask them questions, give you some inside information and some insight about the culture in the organization, maybe the challenges they face. It's a great opportunity for extra preparation. It's a best practice, I would say, to take this step, and it'll inform your interviewing and give you a much better chance of being the final selection if you do this. Now, if you haven't done this for the initial interview, and you get called back for a second and third interview, the urgency to get this done ramps up, and now there's some time pressure. So this is kind of all built around target companies and preparing in advance and finding a job instead of being found, instead of just sitting at home and waiting for someone to call you with an opportunity that looks good to you, turn that completely on its head and start a search for companies that or you suspect, and then you verify through informational interviews, so that they would be interested in you. They have opportunities that you would be interested in, and a culture that excites you as well. That's a much better approach than the random walk of waiting for a job to open in a good company and you being the perfect candidate for the job. So session 11, which we just did a couple of weeks ago, is all about informational interviews and target companies and go take a look at that session if you'd like some more information. Now, also, people don't analyze the job description, I would say. In general, when they come to the pit crew, you know, we prepare, sometimes we prepare much more than the candidate appears to have prepared specifically for the job description. And so there's a whole session, I think it's session 5. Yes, analyzing the job description is session 5. So spend some time with that job description, but just realize that it may not be current, and it may not be all of the job requirements. And so part of the best practices is very early in the interview. As a matter of fact, right after you've had a chance to make your opening statement, you're going to start asking questions to find out if there's any additional requirements or things that are not on the job description, or a different perspective from the person in front of you about what's needed for this role. And I think a lot of times you're going to find out there is, but having a good understanding of what's written down in the job description is a good start, and spend some time on that. And you can even do your own verification before the interview starts by reaching out to people who have the same title, or who had the same title, who used to work at the company and had the same title. You can call them up and say, well, you know, once you've made a little contact and asked them for some help and they've agreed, you know, what is actually required to do this job? You know, what are the challenges that this position faces? What kind of skills would make a good, a productive and successful, you know, employee for this role? And so you can pick up that information in advance by finding people who've had the similar job in the past, who work at a company or don't work at the company, used to work at the company. So opportunities missed when you don't do that kind of outreach networking, I would call it. Okay, opening statement mistakes. So number 1 is an unstructured response. I would say most of the people who come to the pit crew don't really have a good idea how they're going to answer this question. Okay, let's say 80%. And so what happens is they kind of go hunting and fishing, or shotgunning it. They talk about all the things they've done. Sometimes they review their resume. There's no particular message. There's no particular specific ways they could help, or achievements that are going to resonate with the hiring manager. It's just a summary. It's just a summary. And so the best way to do that is to have a structured statement. You know, talk about your motivation, talk about some achievements. You don't have to talk about how you did them. You just need to mention the achievements. Your job description, it may also be based on the research that you've done, and you have some idea how you can help them. And so those are kind of the 2 areas that you need to cover: your motivation and the ways you can help. And you may also, you know, depending on your situation, talk a little bit about your professional training and a little bit about yourself. And there's a whole session on session 6, openings and closings, where we talk about how to do this well. The main takeaway, I think, is have some structure, have some purpose in that opening statement. Don't just wing it. Don't just talk about your resume. Don't just talk about what you do. Talk about how you can help and why you're motivated to help this company at this time in this role. So that's the best practice. I just mentioned this. Even if they ask to review your resume, you don't want to review your resume first. You want to make your opening statement, which, by the way, needs to be relatively short. 2 minutes would be good. And so it's not going to take a lot of time to show that you're focused, you have purpose, you have an idea how you can help, you have some motivation to help. And then you might say, where would you like to start? Or you might even offer a question. Would you like to hear about a time where I did something X, Y, and Z? If they really want to review your resume, then that would be the time to do it. And then, of course, you got to work in your first questions, right? What are their top priorities? So you know if the job description is accurate, or if there's additional things that haven't been added that are important that aren't on the job description. Okay, yeah. the third bullet up here, not immediately transitioning to your first question after the opening statement. This is really important. And when we talk about difficult questions, which we did last week, a lot of difficult questions you might receive, like specifically questions about your background or things that are missing in your background or your lack of experience in a certain area, can be addressed by knowing what their most important priorities are, okay? And so you can deflect those questions by talking about how you meet those important criteria, which they just told you, a few minutes before, as opposed to not having something that was on the job description. And if they, if they still, pursue it, you're open to say, well, is this one of the most important things that you need done for this job? Not having a CPA degree or whatever the shortage may be. So it's got a lot of benefits in the interview when you come across some difficult questions, if you know and what their most important priorities are, and you've asked every interviewer that question, okay? Because you may get a slightly different or even a dramatically different perspective from different functional people who are asking you questions. And there's some examples you might add, questions you might ask. What are the characteristics of top performers in this role? For this role, what are your most important priorities? Just a very straightforward question. Where do you need me to help? A little bit later in the interview, I recommend asking this question, based on my background, after you've had a chance to discuss a little bit based on my background, where do you see me making the biggest impact? Which I think is a very good open-ended question. They can answer that question several different ways. And it's good information for you to know as well. Now, some interviewers do not give you a chance to make an opening statement. And so not recognizing or taking the opportunity to make an opening statement is a mistake. And the statistics say about 2/3 of the time, maybe 3/4 of the time, the interviewer is going to ask you to tell me about yourself. But as a matter of fact, if you go take your job title, if you go and Google questions you might be asking an interview for project manager or for accountant or for a customer specialist, you're going to see the first question is, tell me about yourself. Okay, tell me about yourself. So it's very common, but it's not 100%. Okay, it's not 100%. And sometimes for second interviews or third interviews with when a second round or third round interviews, when somebody comes back to practice, we'll on purpose skip asking that question to see if the candidate, after having, practiced before, will go ahead and present their opening statement, even if they're not giving an opportunity to. So this is something you need to be aware of as well. Not everybody's going to give you a chance. You should take the chance, or you should take the opportunity or make the opportunity. It's only a couple of minutes long. It's going to be very focused about your motivation and the way you can help. You need to work that in at the beginning. Don't go deeper into the interview without. Now, let's say that this just doesn't work out. And so what you want to do is, if you don't get the chance to make that opening statement, is you kind of sprinkle in the achievements and perhaps some comments about your motivation without them having to ask. So if you get an opportunity, you can say, would you like to hear a story about, and talk about an achievement? Or, one of the things I want to make sure you're aware of is that I'm really motivated to have this job and work at this company because, just tell them. And so that covers making the opening statement, even if you don't get to make it in the first few minutes. Yeah, here you go. The offer may not be obvious that they ask you to make an opening statement, and it may not even be intended. Okay, they may just be skipping that step. It's not part of their interview ritual, but take the opportunity to make that opening statement. The fifth, I got a lot of these opening statement mistakes. Too much focus on what you do versus how you help. And so these are Walt's words, I do and I help. In the opening statement, it needs to be really focused on achievements and how you help. The chance to talk about how you did it and your personality, who you are, will come up later. But in the opening statement, you're planting these seeds. I can help you. Talk about how you can help. Okay, and so the recommendation is that you don't talk at all about how you did it, just how you can help, what the result was of some activity. Okay, star story mistakes. Star stories are really powerful. They can use them to build an emotional connection with the interviewer, and of course, star stories mistakes based on a kind of a misconception, I think, or a misunderstanding of what the objective is. And I'll tell you the bottom line. The bottom line is to get the result, get to the result within 90 seconds. And so sometimes people will jump the gun on the star story. They won't listen to it all the way. They think they know the answer, and they'll start to speak too quick. Walt's going to cover this in general as an issue with answering any kind of question, not just star stories. Making the star story too long is the primary thing that people do. Now, some people can make it too short. They're too terse. They don't provide enough information. And so that's a mistake as well. But by and large, almost everyone, 9 out of 10 candidates at the pit crew, we give them feedback to be more brief. And so the real trouble with that is the situation and the action part of a star story. So a situation, task, action, result. And so a lot of times people want to cover the situation in quite a bit of depth. I was one of those people as well before I learned this, because my perspective was, if you don't understand how difficult the situation is, you're not going to really be able to understand how great what I did was. But that's what's covered in the result, right? So you don't need to spend a lot of time on the situation. As a matter of fact, it can be very brief, just placing it in a context of where you worked, what your role was at the time, what level, for instance, you were in the company. Also, the action can be very detailed. I mean, there may be a lot of things you did, okay, and you would want to talk about all of them, but you need to also shorten the action part to. So if you have 5 things that you did and you want to talk about all of them, just say, well, I'm just going to share with you the 2 most important things out of the 5 things that were key to this result that I got, which, then you're going to talk about the result. And if the interviewer is curious about what the other 3 things were, they will ask, and then you get another 90 seconds to provide additional information. But if they're not, they may be impressed with the result, but it's not, top of their mind, then you haven't used up time talking about things that they're not particularly interested in. So star stories, I've got a whole session on star stories, session 3, and just don't fall in that trap of talking too much about things that may not be important, and certainly spending too much time on the situation. It can just be very brief. And and what oftentimes happens when people spend too much time on the situation, too much time on the action, they forget to say the result. They forget the money line. And so, as I mentioned, the goal is to get the result in 90 seconds. That's what needs to be in your mind when you're preparing in advance. And by the way, I encourage you to practice telling your star stories. You can record themselves. You can start a Zoom session and record your video of yourself telling the story. You need to kind of develop some muscle memory in your tongue so that the words you want to say come out, and the other things that are floating around in your head don't. Okay, some people get distracted by telling the story and what's happened in the flow of the interview. So you want to practice these things to the extent that you are confident you can deliver them. And if you choose to add or subtract information based on timing or the reaction of the interviewer, you can do that as well. You can be extemporaneous. But getting them brief is going to take some practice, okay? Because most people tend to start drifting. I call it drifting in their focus on answering the question and getting to the result. And so practice. Of course, you can come to the pit crew and practice answering those questions as well, but practice answering them at home with your phone or with a video recorder. And just we say this all the time in the pit crew, brevity is better. So if you can give a star story, the situation, task, action, and result in less than 90 seconds, go ahead and give it in less than 90 seconds. Brevity is valued by hiring managers. Okay, this is a big one. And a lot of people have worked in teams and been trained that there's no I in team. Okay, so they'll tell their star stories using the third person. And that's a mistake. The task can be a team task. The action needs to be what you did, okay? It needs to be your part. What I did was, or my part was, and then the result might be a team result. So most of the star story can be team oriented, but the action has to be about you. They're not hiring the team, they're hiring you. So they want to know what you did and how you reacted and how you addressed your part. And so don't use we more, especially when you're talking about the action part. Some people believe, some people and some personalities. So we interviewed a learning and development specialist last week, and she just really couldn't help but teach. I mean, all of her answers were aimed at teaching, and to the extent she'd tell us what she was going to tell us, and then she would tell us, and then she would tell us what she told us. And it was all very bookish, okay? But what people mostly want to hear is about what you did, how you addressed it, and not how you might do it if you were, reading it in a book, how it might be taught to you or explained to you. They want a very specific instance, your instance, okay? So tell me about a time where you had a difficult customer. So instead of talking about how you handle a difficult customer in general, you'd say, well, if the customer was upset about this, I would do that, or this or the other thing. They want to hear a very specific story, an example of how you handled a difficult customer. And so you're going to include details that only you would know that apply to the story that you're telling. So those, and that's its own trap right there, okay? Because you can be too detailed or too specific. So you have to decide, and this is why you practice in advance, which details are important to this story, and use those details, not all the details, not every little nuance needs to be included, but enough needs to be included to build your credibility. And that's how you do it. You talk about things that are very specific, have numbers. Dollars are good. Dollars are the best. You can talk about dollars, but transactions are just numbers, and transaction events or percentage improvement. Or if you're just telling a one-on-one story about a customer, you can be very specific about what they were upset about because right? Because you asked those questions, and that'll help build credibility. A caution about percentage, some people say things were improved 50%. Well, that's not very helpful unless it's put into context. So things were, it's a lot different improving things by 50% if it's 2 to 3 than if it's 200 to 300, right? So there you're back to providing a number to put that percentage in context, okay? And that will tell them what the scope and span of your achievement was. Okay, common panel interview mistakes is focusing too much time on the panelist who asked the question. And so this is very difficult to do in a video interview because there's really only one person there, it's the camera. But when you're meeting face to face, you want to continue to talk to everybody who's in front of you. So spend a little bit of time, a couple of sentences for each person, and just go around the room as you answer the question. This also gives you a chance to see what their reaction is, to check their body language or their facial expressions to see if you're landing or not. And so that's a common mistake when we used to meet face to face, that people would tend to spend too much time addressing the person who asked the question and not with the other members of the interview panel. I put a comment down below that the same way with asking some of these personalized questions until you kind of sorted out what each person's role and responsibility is. You want to just ask questions that anyone could respond to, not aimed at any particular person. And then you'll learn by the questions that you ask and what their particular focus is. Also, complimenting a single panelist is a bit of a mistake, and a lot of people use this phrase. Maybe it's a crutch phase. That's a great question, but it's a common way to slight all the other panelists who haven't yet asked their great question. Okay, so singling them out for praise and not praising the other two. It's kind of like complimenting one without complimenting the other two. So don't use that, don't do that. You might say, and instead of saying that's a great question, or you might say, well, I'm glad you asked that question. It's something I wanted to address, and then go into it. Taking the lead, let's talk about this for a moment. And I think I'm getting pretty close to my part, end of my part. This is a quote from Jack Bick. Jack Bick's a coach with the Pit Crew and Career Alliance. He's written couple of books, and he volunteers his time with the Pit Crew. And he said this one time, I thought it was a great line: the middle of the interview is a conversation created by you. Okay, so you guys may recognize that getting into a conversation or a dialogue with the interviewer is a good idea. It gives them a chance to talk. It gives you a chance to get additional insight, to learn about the role, to build a connection with them. But it's not likely to happen unless you make it happen by asking questions. Okay, it's going to be they ask, you answer. It's going to be an interrogation. It's going to be no different than anyone else who allows themselves to be interrogated. And so you have to take the lead, and that's why the title in this slide is Taking the Lead. This is going to separate you from the pack, is starting a conversation by asking questions. So how do you do this well? Okay, you have a list of pre-prepared questions that you want to ask, and certainly those ones right at the beginning, you're going to get started right after your opening statement to start asking questions to get them to tell you and show your interest, your persistence and interest, your goal to figure out what they need help with, and how you can provide that help. Okay, so that's your pre-prepared questions, and of course those questions you ask at the end of the interview as well. What are the next steps? How do you see me fitting in? Are good questions. So you make that list of questions, and but that's not the middle. That's just the beginning and the end. Okay. Pop-up questions, I already gave you kind of an example of a pop-up question. So they ask a question, and then that ignites a thought or curiosity or an interest in you, and so you ask a question back. Okay. This is a very good way to get them to start talking and for you to gain information, and also to start to make a connection, because you'll start, if your thinking is aligned, and that's kind of the definition of rapport, you begin to understand that you think that each of you think alike, you have this kind of thing in common. Then through asking questions, you can discover that. And then what about questions are used to influence the course of the interview? And they may not be, what about's kind of a general word. I mean, have you ever thought about doing X, Y, and Z? And it's a way to solicit a response for them, but also to get a boomerang, right? So they may say, I never thought about it, but tell me more, what do you think about it? I'll just boomerang that question back to you. So if it's something that isn't on the job description, but might be helpful, you suspect highly it might be helpful, this is a great time to say, well, what about, have you ever thought about using agile project management techniques to improve financial forecasting or improve sales forecasting? So this would be kind of a non-standard concept for using agile techniques, which are mainly used for software development. Maybe you've done that. I've seen some pretty interesting things done like this. And so you could just ask this question and see if they've ever thought about it, because you have experience with it. It works. You could implement it in their company, and it may be a differentiator. It may turn out to be a differentiator. Now, any of these types of questions can be personalized. So you can ask the question generically, what do you think about? Or you might say that that's more of a personalized question. Then you might say, I was wondering if you've ever done X, Y, or Z. Or you can say, I was wondering what your opinion is, or how do you feel about? So that's a more personalized approach. And when we talk about asking questions in session 6, nope, in session 8, I'm sorry, asking questions in session 8, we talk about how you personalize questions. And so that's a best practice as well.
I agree with everything Mark said. So let me just go over a couple things. In general, in the past sessions, kind of Mark has put together his stuff and I've put together my stuff. Gives you kind of two opinions, and a lot of it overlaps. A huge amount really overlaps. So on this one, and what I did, I said, gee, everything he said, there's no need for me to repeat a lot of the things that I think are critical and important. So I tried to remove a lot of the overlap that would come from what I would say and what he would say. So by the fact that I don't say everything he said does not mean I always support his stuff, because I do. So that's good stuff. So before I show the first slide that I have, here's the nutshell of avoiding crashes. There's two ways I can say it. One is you didn't do things in lessons 1 through 10. Okay. So it's kind of a really large amount of stuff, but what are the ones that may be the most critical in impact? And so what I would come down to a phrase or something, I think, like this. If we don't really have the right mindset going into the interview, we don't practice brevity, conciseness, and we don't give clear, relevant responses in their frame of reference, we're headed down the wrong path. So it's your mindset that makes a big change. And if you have the right mindset, and that gets me into the first slide, that'll help us do a much better job of presenting ourselves and differentiating ourselves with other candidates. So I just picked out a few of them. And so let's talk about negative questions for a moment, because generally they're kind of scary to answer and it causes a little bit of anxiety about how we handle them. So one response that I get is, I can't think of anything. Well, you're going to get blown away with that one, because there's got to be something negative in your background and experience. All right. So that one doesn't get us very far at all. And if we're too brief and terse, now there's a part of brevity that I think is paying attention to, and I'll get into that in a second. But we can't just say something negative and just leave it there. Then there's a problem with people telling too much information about the negative. Okay. And then we might select something that has a negative impact on the business. Right? One guy said he accidentally hit the emergency shut-off button on the wall in the data center and shut down the data center. Okay, I wouldn't choose that as an example. I mean, it's a great example of the greatest failure, but it won't get you hired either. So we don't have to pick that one. We want to pick something a little bit easier on impact of the business, and failing to then comment on what was the learning or how we manage something, if it's a weakness, that resulted from that mistake. Because the real question and the motive behind the question is, do you recognize your mistakes? And what did you do about them? What did you learn from them? So how to do it well? We can ignore things like, tell me some recent mistakes. We can ignore recent and we can ignore plural. But so we select a nit. It doesn't have to be recent. Nits are defined by something that doesn't have a big business impact. It has a little business impact. Whatever the negative is, use just a few words. You can tell the truth, but not the whole truth, the god-awful truth in some cases. And then positively, so that mindset goes to, what did I learn? Or how do I manage or develop, a weakness? So I could give you an example. I used this one before, you may have heard it. I often forget to use my coupons at the grocery store. So what I do is I'll put them in the glove compartment on the car, and they're always available every time I go to the store. And I stop. Okay. So here's the mistake. Here's what I learned. Here's what I do so that I don't make that mistake again. Now, the god awful truth is I forget to take them out of the glove compartment. When I take them into the store, I forget to give them to the cashier. And then when I get back in the car and I look at them, they're expired anyway. So that's a true story. And that happens to me. And I still have problems with the dadgum coupons, okay? Well, I don't want to, you know, if I'm an open truth teller, I'm going to just open my kimono and just show all the bad stuff, all right? Well, those of us that want to do that are not going to be successful in getting a job. So we can tell the truth. One person was asked, tell me about some of your recent mistakes. I said, okay, one was this, another one was this, and another was this. And I said, stop. He said, well, I'm answering the question. I said, great, you answered the question that way and you won't get the job. So which way do you want to go? So you've got some options here as to how to do that. So how to handle these negative questions are in this how to do this well. So speak with positivity. My expertise in this area is growing as I learn more and more, okay? Working knowledge, I'm able to learn quickly. I have expertise in a similar area. Maybe their CRM system is different than the one you're used to, but I'm very familiar with this and I can easily pick up, and I have the expertise, then I can easily pick up the new system to learn the inputs, outputs, et cetera, and how to navigate the system. Something like that, all right? Now, if they get to a biggest negative, the greatest failure, okay? What was your biggest mistake you ever made or something like that? Here's my suggestion on answering that. Remember that it doesn't have to have a big business impact to be a big mistake or a big failure. The difference between a mistake and a big failure is basically, and then he said, catch somebody doing something right. And it changed my leadership style from that day forward. And even in my personal life with my family and my children, all right? I came home that day and I caught my children doing something right and it blew their minds away. I couldn't believe it was me talking to them. You know, what happened? Because I said, I saw what you were doing. We didn't do anything, Dad. We didn't do anything. I said, yes, you were. You were sitting in there playing together, having a good time, enjoying one another's company, you know, and they were like amazed because I would say something like that to them instead of saying, whose socks are these on the floor? Come in here and pick these things up. So I changed that approach. And that works also well in the company. So now when I recognize somebody, I would recognize them individually first. If they get a bonus, I give them the pocket, they have the money in the pocket first, then I recognize them publicly. So that kind of thing changed my life. So that's just an example of that. Overqualified. Here's what I hear a lot in interviews. The first thing I generally hear quite often is, no, I don't think so. Don't you think you're overqualified? No, I don't think so. And I hear I'm absolutely qualified. Absolutely, Abby suggests that we tell that one. With all my experience, look at what value I bring to the position. I can hit the ground running. Yeah, okay. No, you maybe not think you're overqualified, yet you're right qualified. I mean, yeah, you feel like you are. I can bring greater value to the position. Yes, I can hit the ground running. I can mentor and coach others to develop. Yeah, you can do that, okay? Some of us say, well, there's some additional, I don't know everything. There's some additional learning opportunities. And then they sell the difference in the fact that I haven't worked in this industry before, which gives me a good reason not to hire you because you don't have experience in this industry. And my experience will be an asset to the company, will help me be, do well in this position. And you're right. That's all. You're right. Okay. But my question to you is, have we answered the motive to the question? There's a motive for asking this question. What have we done? Well, first of all, we told them they're wrong. We said, no, I'm not overqualified. Well, they think we are, right? And then we give them all the reasons to show them that we are overqualified. So that technique doesn't work very well. So I suggest first we target right. What position are you targeting? Are you willing to take a lower level position? Maybe you are. Maybe you've reached a point in time. I did that in my last job. I went from a significant leadership role to an individual contributor role as a customer relationship manager dealing with colleges and universities in the state of Texas. So it was like a stepping down position from the things that I used to do. So they'll ask questions, overqualified, lower level, something like that. So they believe we're overqualified. It doesn't matter whether we are or not, they believe we are because they asked the question. The motives, there's several things that can come up in the motives. This question has probably more motives, potential motives, than any other question. We're old and set in our ways, all right? It's going to be a lower salary. We can't adapt to change too much. we can't keep up with the things that are going on in the world. And and you look back at all the changes you've been through in your career, and you're saying, you don't think I can keep up with changes? How do you think I survived over the last 15, 20 years in my role? Lack of interest in long-term employment. Oh, you're just going to work for a couple of years and then retire, and you're going to quit. You're just looking to finish out your career, which may be true. Some of us are saying, I just want to work for 3 or 4 more years, and that's it. And the main concern, being the biggest one, is a short timer. You won't be happy here, you won't like it, and you'll leave. And I don't want to invest all that time in you and money in you to bring you on board, get you acclimated, get you going, get you started, and then you turn around and leave. So here's a suggestion how we might approach it. Let's agree with the interviewer. Well, if you say that I'm overqualified, would you agree that I'm qualified? Well, of course you are. And they're going to agree with that. And that's a little bit of a sales technique to start them to move from a negative situation in their mind to a positive situation in their mind. Because we are in a selling presentation. We need to learn how to sell ourselves, right? So let's talk about things that says, this is the job for me and why, and this is the place where I want to do it and why. In other words, convince me that this is the job you want to do and that you want to do it here. Now, in my opening statement, this is a couple of things that I include in my outline for your opening statement to tell them why you love this type of job, doing these type of activities, producing these kinds of results, and why this particular company, their services, their products, the industry, whatever it might be, that says these things energize me to work in this position in this company, right? So I actually say that's a couple of things you can put in your opening statement to already show that you're interested in that job, no matter what your background and responsibilities might have been. I also suggest we go to the motive itself, to the most general, most often used motive of why asking this question. And we close it. We go directly to the motives. I never take a position where I'm not fully committed. That tells people that I'm not a short timer. This is the thing I want to do. I'm 100% in on this. I won't be leaving soon. And if other motives are revealed, if they come back and say, well, I'm concerned about salary or something like that, then you're going to have to address those. Are you willing to take a lower pay? Have you had experience working with a younger boss? Have you shown your adaptability to change and your flexibility to move forward? And you probably have some stories where you can talk about those kinds of experience and how you handle those and show that it was not an issue or a problem. Closing is a big one, so I brought this one in. The biggest mistake I see is no close at all. Zero close, nothing. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. I look forward to hearing from you soon. Okay, I cringe when I hear those words. I'm sure that a car salesman will come up to me and say, well, I'm glad to show you these vehicles today. Thanks for coming in and talking to me and find out some information. I look forward to hearing from you soon. Here's my card, and you walk out. No, car salesmen don't do that. No salesperson does that. But we do as candidates, we do it often. We don't close a sale. We all agree we're in a selling situation, then we ought to have a close. Not summarizing your interest in the value that you bring. So in a close, I can help you do this, okay? Seeking feedback. How do I compare to the ideal candidate? Do you see me fitting into this role? Ask for feedback. You may not get an answer. Most of the time, interviews are, they don't have to tell us anything and we have to tell them everything, right? It's kind of unfair. But you can watch body language. It's not going to hurt you to ask the question. Think about it from the interviewer's perspective. I mentioned that earlier in your answers. From the interviewer's perspective, if you ask them and says, I'm really curious to know how you would compare me to the ideal candidate. It's a positive way of saying, do you have any concerns about me fulfilling this role? Please don't ask, do my qualifications fit the job? I'm going to tell you why. First reason is, yes, they do, but that doesn't mean you're going to get hired. All right. Qualifications are not the only thing that makes the hiring decision. It's your personality, it's your culture fit, it's your soft skills, It's how you communicate and how you talk. It's not so much the story you tell, it's more powerful in how you tell it. I remember in the pit crew, question was asked for a star story and person laughed. He said, that was a fun one. And then he told the story showing how much fun he had going through that process to achieve specific results. And all the panel members says that was one of the best things that the person did was how they told that story, and laughing and saying that was a fun one, that he enjoyed doing that. Always find out what their process is for hiring. Update it as you go along. Who will I be interviewing with? What are their names? What are their roles? Get as much information as you can. There's some information about in other sessions about being careful about some things, because recruiters don't like to give away too much information. They're afraid you're going to go around them. So you can say, I'm just looking for information so I can do some research. I promise you that I won't go around you. I will go through you with the communications of anything I need to allay that concern. But always find out what's the update. Who's the hiring manager? Who makes the hiring decision? Could be HR. When's the projected start date? When's your decision date? Who will I hear back from as a result of this meeting? When should I hear back from them? All right, those are the questions that you ask. Because why? You want to know everything you can know about the next steps. When it's going to happen, what's going to happen, whatever. Then you know when to contact them. When should I hear back from somebody? Okay, well, Jeff, you said I'll hear back from you. And when should I hear back from you? All right, so it's a Friday week. And if I don't hear from that date, can I give you a call on Monday about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, right? That's called taking charge of your job search, right? And that's what we want to do. And depart with the same enthusiasm and interest on the job in the company as you entered. It's not one of, thank God it's over, some relief. It's one of, it's been great visiting with you today. It has been, and it's the way you say it. Repeat, I can't wait to get started. I look forward to the next step. Those kind of comments. Now, let me just talk about some general ones. We'll kind of end up this thing. General interviewing mistake that can lower your standing. All right. I would say this is the most important one. It's not demonstrating genuine enthusiasm or interest. So if your mindset is one of fear, anxiety, not sure, that sort of thing, when you walk in, how can you show enthusiasm or interest? It's pretty hard. But if you are genuinely excited about the position, the company, the interviewer, finding out more about the jobs, the expectations, the roles, the things that you'll be doing, the achievements, the things, that how you'll be measured, and finding out all those things, it is exciting and energizing to you, then you will show that in the interview. So we need to be in that mindset. How do you get there? Well, it's practice. It's practice, right? Practice gives you that confidence. And that's what Mark and I are in business doing, free of charge, to help you shorten your job search so that you can say, all right, I feel very confident. And now I can show that interest and enthusiasm in the interview itself. Answering the questions. If your view is just to go in and answer these questions and get out of Dodge, that's going to be pretty poor for being selected as a candidate in moving forward. A lot of people go in and say, you know, just please God, help me answer these questions and get out of here. Well, that's one end of the spectrum. I just described the other end. So prepare our questions, prioritize them so we can integrate them during the interview. I wholeheartedly suggest we ask that opening question on the characteristics, or how will I be measured? What achievements are you looking for me to accomplish in this role? So we can start selling to those things. It starts a conversation starter. You don't just find them out. We said, okay, which one would you like to talk about first? Now, one of the persons mentioned, and she's not online now, says, you know, I'm an outstanding executive assistant looking to support executive management. And if we just change those words around a little bit with interest and excitement and say, I am an effective and efficient executive assistant, maximizing support for executives to make impactful decisions. Now, I just changed the words around a little bit. I put it in their frame of reference. I'm saying, gee, I'm looking for a person who's energetic. I'm looking for a person who does well in organizing and being effective and being efficient. So I'm describing myself. I'm telling you a little bit about who I am, you know, in that answer. So it's just a different way of thinking will generate these kinds of words. Speaking too quickly while trying to formulate a response. Oh, I'm telling you, there is some pressure on us to answer a question quickly, or we think we're going to just die right there on the spot. We've got to answer right away. No, you don't. No, you don't. In fact, that's totally wrong. I'm going to tell you, usually I say, consider this or consider that, and I'm just going to tell you flat out. That's wrong. Pause. Pause. So pause and think before answering with a nice, clear, concise response. I'm thinking about the person in the picture that we asked a question to. He said, let me think about that for a moment, took out a piece of paper, a pad, pencil, wrote down things, took about a minute, and then came back and gave us a nice, clear response. And every panelist said that was the best part of the interview, was that person pausing, organizing their thoughts. It was not a simple answer to a question. It had some complexity to it. Stopped, took the time to put the thoughts together in a day. We were all very impressed with that. This was an executive level person. This is what we expect executive level people to do, all right? Some people walked in and said, I want to show you that I'm quick on my feet and I can think rapidly, all right? Well, if you can do that successfully, go for it. But at the same time, I think the interviewers are much more impressed with people who pause and think and give a nice, clear response. Speaking from our perspective only. So somebody was asked, why do you want to work here? And what did they say? They said, well, why do you, because I think, I really enjoy the environment. You've got great training. I like learning new things. I like a good work-life balance, and I believe you excel at that. And finally, you're just a few minutes from the house. So my question is, whose frame of reference are you in? Well, you're in your frame of reference. Is anything wrong with this answer? Not necessarily wrong. That's your perspective. So if you want to give that, that could be great. But I'm going to tell you, the fact that you live a few minutes away from this job is not a part of the reason that I'm going to hire you. It doesn't mean anything to me. If I could add or maybe replace with what I really enjoy doing is I enjoy doing these kind of activities, producing these kind of results. For example, and I give an R and a star story of achieving something that's relevant to that position. So I'm driven by the results more than the activities. So you can mention your activities, but add your results to it, or just give the results. Why do you want to work here? Because I like turning customers around, et cetera, doing the things that are they that you're hiring me for.
Here we go. All right, so that's our presentation that we've got. For those people who are on Zoom, I'm going to finish up a few slides and then we'll leave it and let you all, Mark and Walt are with you and they can answer any questions you have. And for those people who are sitting here, if you have any questions, when I get done, we'll break off and we'll answer questions here for you. We'll let the Zoom people go that way. So let me just share a few closing slides and we'll stop here. All right, Career DFW and Career USA, we're putting on training 4 days a week. Hopefully you'll join us. Every Tuesday we do a LinkedIn presentation. Every Wednesday as you are here, we do interviewing. Every Thursday, resumes or networking. And then every Friday, the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group meeting. Tomorrow being the 5th Thursday, I'll be doing a presentation called Successful Job Searches Focus on These 4 Areas. That'll be tomorrow at 1 o'clock. I'll be doing it live from the AMCP Expo. And so please, you're welcome to join us on Zoom, or if you're here in the conference, you can join us here in the conference room. This Friday at the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group meeting at 9:30 in the morning, we'll do open forum. We'll talk about whatever questions you have about your job search. These are the 13 sessions that they've referred to many times, and you're welcome to watch any of these that are on the Career USA YouTube channel. The first 5 sessions all talk about what you do before the interview. So what is it that you need to do to prepare for an interview? Talking about star stories, analyzing the job description, everything you need to do before the interview. The next 5 sessions talk all about what do you do during the interview, opening and closing, a lot of things we talked about today, common mistakes that people make, how to ask questions during the interview, a whole session on just demonstrating enthusiasm and how to build rapport with the interviewer. And then the last 3 sessions, a few advanced topics, how to shorten your job search using informational interviews. If you haven't done an informational interview, that's where you go out and you just ask for information and advice. You never, ever ask for a job. And then difficult interviewers, how to handle difficult interviewers, how to answer difficult questions. And then this session, avoiding interview crashes. This session will be uploaded. It has been recorded. It'll be uploaded to the Career DFW Facebook page. I will be uploading it tonight to the Career USA YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook. Every time you do, your phone will give you a little buzz saying we're live on Facebook. Every time we post a new video on the YouTube channel, you'll get a little email saying that we posted a new video. On the Career USA YouTube channel, please click on playlist, because otherwise you'll just see a jumbled mess of like 300 videos. And then up will come the different list. Every video I post, I do stick into a different playlist to make it easy for you. Then down below, find the group that you want. Don't click on the video, but down below we see a green arrow, click on view full playlist. And then up will come a list of all the different titles, and you can scroll down to find whatever topic and title you'd like to go back and watch. If you're not receiving emails about any of our workshops and you'd like to join the Career USA mailing list, please send an email to CareerUSA, the +subscribe at groups.io. You'll never be spammed, but what you will get is the title of the day, the topic of the day, and most importantly, the Zoom link of the day. That way you can grab your lunch and join us for some learning every day of the week, every Tuesday through Friday. Please remember, Career DFW, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We have no full or part-time employees. Mark and Walt, who spoke today, they're both volunteers. I'm a volunteer. I've never gotten paid to do any of this over the last 13 years. I just do this to help you land your next great job. Please consider making a donation when you get your next job. So thank you very much for joining us today. I'll stop the recording. I'll let Mark and Walt continue on with any questions you all have, and then we'll get questions answered here. So give me just a second here.